A team of researchers has arrived back in Prince George after a trip to the scene near the Mount Polley Tailings Pond spill. They were there much of last week collecting their own water samples, but their work is far from over.
The day the Mount Polley Tailings Pond breached its banks, researchers at the Quesnel River Research Centre began sampling. They took water samples from Hazeltine Creek, Quesnel Lake, and the Quesnel River. They also took soil samples with what's called an Ekman grab.
We have done some Ekman grabs on the deposit itself, and then now this week we're sending out a group to do some work on some of the deposits further afield to see if we're actually seeing a difference in the very surface material relative to what was there before the spill.
Some of those samples have been sent away for testing, while others can be compared to existing samples at the research centre already.
Potentially some very interesting things occurring that could be potentially a little worrying. But I think what we need to be a little careful is obviously we've got to step back and make sure that we get a fairly good body of data before we can really, make some comments. We're hoping that we might be able to say things in the next few weeks.
A few days after the breach, ministry officials determined the water was within the guidelines for drinking water, but the ban remains in place.
We don't really know how quickly it flushed out, and we also don't know, it's a big lake, so there's a lot of dilution, but in terms of how fast it passed that area, whether the sampling was done after it had passed, would be one idea, or the fact that the bulk of the material actually hasn't reached it yet.
Dr. Ellen Pettigrew calls the findings surprising but pleasing. In the meantime, the research centre has become the focus of attention by many others.
Institutes like the Institute of Ocean Science in Victoria, universities like UBC, SFU and University of Toronto have all been approaching us with offers of help because they have expertise and capacity, and obviously they have instruments that we don't necessarily have.
Dr. Phil Owens says the research typically carried out by the centre will continue, but with renewed urgency. Cheryl Jan, CKPG News.